Hello, everyone. This is Mark Valentine. I'm working on presenting you with the beginning of the estimators course. And I'm presuming that you absolutely know nothing. And that's where this particular video is going to take us. So when you're looking at this from an experienced estimator's point of view, you will not need to go through this particular video. So move on to the next one. This is as if you know nothing, essentially fresh out of high school, never been in a construction site, nothing like that. And you're wanting to learn how to do estimating for whatever reason. But this is going to go over what the general concept is in the construction industry. And no further ado, here we get started. All right, as you can see up here, I've got a few things set up. Right here, we're looking at the construction process. The construction process begins with the primary stakeholders. Primary stakeholders is anyone who owns a piece of property or is likely to buy a piece of property or looking for a business adventure or venture or something like that. So it might be a single person, it might be an entity, it could be a government. So you see a single owner financed with a finance partner. So typically, people don't use their own money to buy property. They use a financial partner for the most part, with the exception of the government, they use taxes. Group owned might have accumulation of their own shares, if you will. So they've purchased shares and they're using the money from their purchased shares and it goes through the management. Oh, should have misspelled that. I got management. I'll fix that. Maybe or maybe not. Who cares? All right. Whichever way it is, it doesn't really matter. They decide that they want to put in a coffee shop. They use they have to build a conceptual project. So the conceptual project is, we think this area needs a coffee shop. And so they'll do a market study. How big's the coffee shop got to be? So the demographics, college kids coming through. So they'll do a market study. They will find funding if they need more funding. If it's a big enough venture, they can be funded locally. They can be funded through their partners. Um, Subordinate stakeholders. Let's say they want to do something more elaborate. And so they reach out to other groups or other developers and they say, hey, we're building this, or at least we think we want to build this. What do you think? You guys want to throw in some cash? And that's how they get together. So they build a coalition right here. Then they decide, okay, with the conceptual idea, they go to the design team. They submit through various avenues, even by cold calling architects and engineers. They'll typically through an architectural firm. They'll submit a request for qualifications, RFQ, request for qualifications. You'll see that on your bidding sites and on your advertisements in newspapers and things like that. So what ends up happening is RFQ then the design team is selected. There's a bidding process very similar to what we're going to be dealing with. So they'll do a proposal plus a cost and all that other stuff, and they're selling their design powers and uh, uh, portfolio to the stakeholder team. All right. So they refine the project down based on what the stakeholders say they want to do, and they keep working it out till they get it to uh, a buildable document. Then they collaborate with the jurisdictions. So there's a master. I don't want to go into that. It's a master permitting agreement. Essentially, they go to the city wherever you're going to build this coffee thing. They're going to say, "Hey, we're building this coffee thing. It's going to have the face of the forward face of the project is going to look like this. it's not in a historical building, or it is in a historical building, so we're going to do it this way. The jurisdiction folks, the guys at the building department, will have a meeting. Is it going to make the neighborhood look like crap? Is it appropriate? You don't want a strip joint next to a elementary school, junk like that, or a drug paraphernalia shop or anything like that. So that's why jurisdictions have the right to say yay or nay on it. But they have to have some type of conceptual drawing to get that started. Then they can start the permitting process. They refine the drawings. They work with the jurisdictions. Everybody's freaking happy. Then they talk with legal teams. They get contracts generated. So architects will use AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects. I believe that's what it is. They'll use contracts based on that, or they might have some other contracts that the primary stakeholders used to, or their legal team is, whatever. So after that, they generate a request for proposal. And that request for proposal is once again put out on plan centers, on bulletin boards, across all sorts of different different uh, marketing sites. All right, so it'll go to the public plan rooms, private negotiations. So let's say sometimes the primary stakeholder has a subordinate stakeholder. The subordinate stakeholder is a general contractor or a developer that knows a general contractor or has got a cousin. Some type of networking event has occurred. So instead of going to public bids, they'll go right to private negotiation. Okay, so that's what that's for. Public plan rooms, typically, if it's a government job, they will post it, and it's required by law that it's an open, everyone can see it. So it's posted on all these job site or all these plan rooms, but it's open to the public. Whereas commercial jobs are not will not necessarily follow that route. College jobs will, institutionals will, things like that. But if it's a commercial job, you typically have to pay for that to open it and process those plans so that you can work on it and create a bid. So then you take a look at it. Your team will take a look at it, see whether it's meets your company's criteria and your focus, and then find out what type of bid types there is. There's a lot of different bid types or contractual types. For this estimating, we're going to stick with the firm fixed or fixed firm. Geez, I misspelled that one too. Fixed firm bids and contract. There's a bunch of different ones. I don't want to go into that. They're pretty complicated, and they have the right to have their own. Say fixed firm essentially is, I'm going to do it for this price, and that's the price that we're going to compete with. All right, so you got all that. All right, now we go down to, we're going to move over here. Here's the bid type. There's the fixed firm. So now that it's a fixed firm, this is what we're going to do to find out whether or not it's a decision to pursue it. All right, this is a business decision typically set up before it even hits the estimator, but it then is further refined. So we look at the contract documents. That includes all the addendums, the drawn plans, if there are any, and the specifications. It also includes the solicitation notice in some cases. There are some other documents that go along with it, but that's what you're going to base your opinion on. All right, then you got your collaborative partners. You got to check with them, see where they're at, whether or not they can be part of this. And so typically a general contractor will have a pool of subcontractors, and each subcontractor will be based on their CSI division that they work in. CSI is the Construction Specifiers Institute. They use a master format program that essentially blocks out all the different things like Division 0, Division 1, Division 2. Division 2 is like demolition, abatement, all that stuff. Division 3 is your concrete. Division 4 masonry. Division 5 steel. 6 carpentry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And so they break it out, and those divisions are then subdivided into further categories within there. So rough carpentry, for example, is division 6 in a subcategory. And finished carpentry is also in division 6 as a subcategory, just to give you an idea. All right, so you find out which trade partners are not consumed by other work or whatever, see where their status is. You find out who your build team is. Do you have a build team that's qualified to do this type of work? You refer back to your book of knowledge, make sure that you have information that's related to this type of work. You look at your master schedule, and master schedule is a schedule of all projects throughout the year, coming and going, work in progress type of thing for your company. And you compare it to what the bid documents are saying the start and finish dates are to make sure that you even have the ability to cover it. Otherwise, why waste your time? You also check out your competitors. All right. So when a bid is being worked on, when the solicitations have gone out and there's a request for proposal, so go to the yellow. It says GCGM, so it's general contractor or general manager, construction manager. So it should be GCCM, construction manager, RFP. RFP is request for proposal. It goes to bid type, fixed firm, and then you go into this. During that, there's a solicitation for a pre-bid job walk. And in that pre-bid job walk, typically serious bidders will show up. Not always. There's always a guy that sneaks in. But if it's a mandatory job walk, and sometimes it is mandatory, then the people that are there are your competitors, or in some cases, your subcontractors. And either they're subs to you or subs to your competitors. Sometimes it's good to, in fact, all times, it's good to shake hands with your competitors. Um, it's not like you're going to win everyone and they're not going to win everyone, and it's because of how you do constructability. What other factors? There's so many factors in trying to develop a good estimate that's competitive that you're only going to win 1 in 5 or even maybe 1 in 8 or 10, depending on what sector you're in and how much competition. Okay, so these guys are in the same boat as you, guys and girls, and eventually it's a small community. You're going to end up bumping into each other everywhere. You might as well get friendly and get to know each other. Not a big deal. Also get to know the subs because you want to add them to your pool of contractors. And it's always good to know your competition. You can look at them as an enemy. I don't necessarily want to do that. I look at it more like professional football. All right. Or even, yeah, let's go with professional football. College football is a little different. There's some emotion, a little more emotion involved. Professional football, it's different. So each one of them knows that they're on a different team, and at any time they could be traded and end up on the same team. So yes, while it's friendly competition, it is possible that they're going to end up on the same team. And so that goes with estimating. There might be a time as an estimator converts over to a PM or decides to stay in estimating, there might be a time that both of you are in the same company or in the same situation. All right. Or might need each other's help. There's a lot of times where the bonding issue, like on bigger projects, one company can't bond the project. And so what ends up happening is two competitors joint venture together to be able to bond it for the owner to make sure that they can get coverage. And so you get these odd ducks. And if you're vicious and mean, I mean, be competitive. But if you're vicious and mean, no one wants to JV with you, the joint venture with you. So get to know them. All right. You never know what's going to happen. And you might need their help come an emergency. You know, if a if an unexpected earthquake occurs while you're working and they've got equipment that isn't tied up and you have all your equipment tied up, you might need their help. So yeah, network, it's key. All right, then you look at let's go back here to where, so that was competitors. Let's go back to market congestion. All right, so if I'm here in Washington State, the market here is desperate for contractors. So it's not congested at all. There's lots of room. Sometimes there's only one bidder on a project. So bid on every project as if, and bid profitably on every project. Because if there isn't any other bidders, or if there's only one other bidder, um, you run the risk if you're too high of the project being canceled or go out to rebid. But you also need to be profitable. So don't presume in a market where it's desperate for contractors that you need to be, within 2% of your competitor in order to win the project. It doesn't make sense. So that's what I mean by market congested. So if there are no projects, like in a downturn of the market in 2008 and in 9/11, uh, there was no work. And so everybody was trying to get that last crumb. And yeah, it was vicious. Some people just bought projects in order to keep their people busy. So there's that. And then of course bondability, like I mentioned earlier. You got to look before you bid on a project, you got to decide, can I bond it? And that is a business decision. And it's also something you discuss with your bonding partner. So it's really important in your company to make bestie friends and honor your bonds with your bonding partners if you want to keep growing that. That's key. If you want to bid on any big projects, you have to have bondability. So with all that analyzed and more, there's more to it. I'm just giving you the basics. It goes to the decision to pursue. All right. And there's a criteria that the company and your senior estimators have worked out. They decide to pursue. Okay, now we're pursuing it. So to generate a preliminary proposal, we've got to look at the constructability of it. Is it within our skill set? If we've got to this point, it's at least within a percentage of our skill set. We might have done something similar to it that's 80%. There's going to be 20% of unknown ability, but it's competent and it's confident might be able to sub out that 20% that we're not absolutely sure of. So we got to look at constructability. And constructability, what that means is, what will it take to construct it? Is it a remodel? Is it out of the ground? Is there contaminated soils? What's the history of the site? Is there stuff I have to do? Do I got to take down power lines in order to get equipment in there? Is it an occupied building and do I have to work inside a hospital, uh, enclosures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you really go over how the hell this project's going to be constructed. And the people that are involved with that. So the nice thing about it is this is a team effort. This is not, Mark doing all the estimating. It's a team effort. We call in our superintendents, we call in our general foremen in a lot of cases, old PMs, senior estimators. We call vendors, and we'll talk about that more about subs and vendors shortly. And we look at our book of knowledge to really see what we got. So, all right. Then we go to the materials takeoffs. This is pretty straightforward. You count how many windows you got, you count how many doors you got, all the hardware. You go through the specifications to make sure that you're getting the right products priced out and the quantity priced out and that type of thing. So then you go down to productivity data. You pull this right out of your book of knowledge. And productivity is how much your crews, based on specific crews, how fast can they do this project? All right. and still maintain safety, quality, schedule, and price, profitability. So that is typically there. So, let's just say by the time it gets into the productivity data, it's either by square foot, lineal foot, cubic foot, something like that. You've broken it down by a lump sum for that type of crew. And as long as it's 1-to-1, like framing a wall, then that's pretty straightforward. If it's one-offs, which, some of the smaller companies will end up doing something that they've never done before, but their carpenters are skilled at it, but they don't have any data for it. So they have to ask the crew or ask the foreman or ask the general, what do you, or not the general, excuse me, general foreman, or even a superintendent say, what do you think it's going to take to get this done with this crew? And then you guys discuss it. Um, and if there's any type of uh, question at all, you have to add a contingency. So without data, you have to put in more contingency, which drives your price up higher, which makes you lose more in competitive markets. All right, you talk about crew experience. That also goes along with the productivity. You might find that you don't have the right foreman, for example, who's done a specialized core for the center of a building where the toilets and the elevators and the stairwells are all in. So you might call out to your friends, other GCs, and say, "Hey, do you have a core foreman that's experienced with Perry scaffolding, for example, or not Perry scaffolding, Perry formwork, for example, if that's what you're going to use." So you determine some of that, and that's determining your constructability. So you see if there's an available foreman or lead supervisor from another company. If you don't have it yourself. So you sort of do those analysis. You find out how much it's going to cost. So if a lead carpenter cost, and I'm talking about total cost, your burdened cost for a person in your in-house is, let's say, it costs the company $88 an hour to have a foreman, for example. If you're borrowing someone from another company, you might have to pay a premium. So you might have to pay $95 so that the other company is making a profit on their lost opportunity by letting you use him. They're going to make a little money because they can't use them now, so they have to make a profit, and that's only fair. So that's something you guys have to negotiate between you, and it's usually friend to friend. Sometimes it's just straight up. Other times it's not. Um, and you want, I'll leave that up to you. I'm not going to go into great detail. All right, so that's your crew experience. Then you go down to your sub and vendor availability. We talked a little bit about that, but some vendors can't supply fabrication. For example, every once in a while, I have to call even more, 6 or 8 um, steel fabricators because it's so busy here. It's just extraordinarily busy. And so you're calling, hey, if we bid on this project, they're saying 60 days after notice to proceed, I have to be done, or else I get liquidated damages. We'll go over liquidated damages later. But the situation is, it's going to cost me money if I'm not done in 60 days. Can you fabricate in 60 days? They're going to make the decision in 15 days with a notice to proceed. There's a little bit of time with paperwork. So within 75 days, can you produce the product that we need produced and installed? And a lot of times the answer is no, no freaking way. So as long as you know that ahead of time, and so when you're doing when your bid solicitation comes out, I talked about the pre-bid walk. There's also a question and answer period. You have a window where you can put in questions and answers or give information. So in those types of things where you send out information, it has to be sent out by email so that everybody gets it. I can say, I've spoken with my vendors. There's no way we can hit a 60-day at all. based on this. That's an unrealistic expectation. The best, we'd like you to extend that to 90 days. And then liquidated damages after 90 days is acceptable to us, or else, and you don't have to threaten it. That's just what you're saying. The design team will decide if that's okay, and they'll have their own criteria. So if they decide that it's okay, they will amend it through an addendum, and then you're good to go. And you talk to your vendors again. Yeah, 90 days, we can hit that. That's not a problem. Okay, great. If you wait too long, because there's a deadline on questions and answers, if you wait too long, too bad. Somebody's going to eat that, or you're not going to bid on it, or whatever. So uh, once you miss the deadline, you miss the deadline. Okay, so same, you're still trying to decide to pursue it, or you've decided to pursue it. You're trying to build your proposal. So you're looking at the location also. So you want to find out, is this project in a distressed zone? Is it next to schools? Is there lead? There should be a survey in here for hazardous materials. That's typically done on the design side. Um, Not always, but it is typically done. It's required here in Washington that you have a survey of hazardous materials done on your property as a building owner, or if you're going to do something like this. Um, Also in engineering. During the design team, they'll do some engineering stuff and exploratory stuff. So anyhow, you should have that information. Then you got to determine how how you're going to get product into the building. If it's an occupied building, you got to so that's your access. You got to find out, I've got to put a crane on site. Is it a tower crane? Is it a support crane? Mobile crane? All that type of stuff. So you're doing a logistics, temporary, I shouldn't say temporary. You're doing a small logistics plan, trying to figure out how you're going to get material and everything else on site. This adds time, complexity, and things like that to your job. So that's important to get that in there. And then you got to find out what your regulatory resistance is. Some municipalities, they sub out all the inspections to a third-party vendor, Terracon or someone like that, that will come out. They'll look at all your welds. They'll look at all the stuff that goes along with making sure that you're following the drawings and following the code. So these guys are certified, third-party vendors are certified to do such inspections, and they write up reports, and those reports get submitted through the design team. They get paid by the design or by the primary stakeholders, but their reports will say in compliance or not in compliance when it goes back to the city. The city has to have it all in compliance before they're going to issue a certificate of occupancy, which allows the stakeholders to occupy the building and use it for its function. So we get to that point. So in some places, the regulatory resistance is brutal. Okay, so um, sometimes in Seattle, for the most part, they're pretty good. But there are times in Seattle that you're not going to get an inspection when you want an inspection, and you don't get to pick what time of day. So you might have a crew sitting around. So if you have situations like that in the area that you're working, and you're going to have 10 guys waiting on the inspector to show up, and you're not doing anything, there's some downtime, you've got to calculate that into your bid. And that's just basic. There's still a ton more that go into this decision. I just wanted to give you a quick decision tree. All right, now we're at the preliminary proposal. We've generated preliminary proposal. Now it goes to a business decision. So the estimator has handed it off to the senior estimator, who hands it off to the vice president. Everybody sits down, they go over the prelim proposal, and they decide, okay, is it worth modifying the overhead and profit? Should we add some contingencies? What are the risks to the company? What is the stat? Now, some things will not come out in this meeting, like the VP or the owner CEO, might know things about the company that you won't. The CFO would know things as well that wouldn't be down at the estimator's level. Okay, for example, let's say behind the scenes there is a lawsuit because one of your subs is suing you, and you're in a lawsuit with an owner on a totally unrelated project, and it's affecting cash flow. Let's say that's the case. You're not going to know about that. All that's going to happen is in this decision, in this overhead and profit, this business decision, is the owner, CEO, whatever, might decide, no, we're not going to pursue this. Or they might say, we'll pursue it, but we want you to add 50% to it. And if we win it at 50%, hey, good for us. Or it might be something totally different and they want to break into a new market. So if you want to get in the hospital market, you've never done a hospital, you haven't done a medical office or something like that. And this is a perfect opportunity to get your guys busy. All the stars have aligned, all the criteria has been met, all these facets have been reviewed, and you feel very confident that this is the time for you to go into that market. This is the project. You might reduce your profit and go ahead and take a loss on it, or the risk of a loss, in order to get into that market. Because you got to build your portfolio, and your portfolio, if you want to get in that market, has to say that you've won one, and you've performed it. So the CEO or vice president would say, let's reduce the profit, let's get rid of the contingencies, and we're going to take the risk. Okay, and hopefully our crews can make up time, make up costs, that type of thing, so that we could win the bid. All right, so essentially you're buying yourself into the game. There's also the same type of thing goes with a new client. If you want to get into a developer's pocket, and be in his pool of selected GCs, then you might have the CEO might have that same business decision there. And cash flow plays into it. Am I going to have enough cash flow? So the CFO, or they probably wouldn't give that to a probably wouldn't give that to the estimator. It would more likely be in the CFO's and the controller's wheelhouse to find out if this project goes when it's supposed to go and when it's scheduled to go. And based on all the criteria that's written in the developed estimate, they might decide that the cash flow is too risky. All right. Cash it's not coming in as fast as you want because you're doing government jobs and you're doing other jobs and you don't have enough supplemental coming in, and you have commitments based on some other projects, and you just don't have the confidence that cash is going to come in order for you to pay for the project, because you have to pay for the project. All right, your vendors are going to help you to some degree, but you got 30 days, plus you got to pay payroll. There's things that you have to pay out of pocket before you before you receive pay. So if it affects your cash flow, that's a no. That's a decision criteria. Safety, quality, and profit. Do we have the ability to do all this? And so that's analyzed in this proposal. And maybe, like in some cases, there are additional safety factors that it might say that you have to have an on-site 24/7 safety manager. Okay, some projects do. Or even a quality control manager, or things like that. So all of that is, oh, did we catch that? And so there's an opportunity here for everyone to look at it and see, maybe we should add another 50,000 for the salary of a safety guy on the project. All right. And then company principles and goals. Is it something the company wants to do? Does it meet their principles and goals? It's pretty important that it does. You don't want to be, if you're a school builder and you're an adult entertainment, and you're looking at doing an adult entertainment project, it might be frowned upon politically to do so, and it may not be aligned with your company principles. That's something that the CEO, vice presidents, and all decide on. So that criteria goes into it. Let's say everybody's tickled pink. They've made some modifications to your overhead, profit, and contingencies, and now it's a biddable proposal. All right, yay! We made it past the next hurdle. Now it goes to we're going to send it out to win the bid. All right, so there's a deadline that they have. You have to get your bid bond. Typically, you need it. They like a week, but you can do it in 24 hours. But they don't like that at all. This is your bid from your bonding company. So you try to do it. Try to give them 72 hours would be ideal. And you can do it early on and either toss it out. So you could do it during the preliminary proposal, have them say, hey, it's going to be somewhere in the $5 million range. I need a bid bond for 5 million, at least to cover 5 million. And they'll send you a piece of paper that says, hey, you're covered for this. And that's your bid bond. You add that. You have a bunch of them. So let's say we've got a 5-person estimating department. All of us are bidding at the same time. We'll have a stack of bid bonds based, they're obviously assigned to each project, but you have a stack of them. And some of the projects will be decided not to be pursued. And you just throw out that bid bond. You don't send it in. There's no loss, there's no harm, no foul. So that's why sometimes we go after the bid bond in the preliminary proposal development stage. All right, so we got the bid bond. Bid bond promises the owner that we're going to hold this price for 90 days or whatever the hell it is, 60 days, depends on the contract or depends on your solicitations and the specifications of Division 1 and your and your bidder's invitation solicitation. So that just guarantees that we're not going to back out at the last second. And if we do, there's going to be, we will honor the cost change between, there's some legalese, but there's going to be money lost for the owner. It's protected if we back out. Okay. And then there's negotiation between them. Let's not worry about that. Not your problem. The bid application. So depending on which entity you're working with, there might be something as simple as your company's form bid is good enough. It covers all your stuff. You're putting it in there. You have your terms and conditions in there. You got all your exclusions built into it, and that's good enough. Sometimes that's the case. Many times they have their own form that they want you to use, and it comes with an example of their contract. So you have to acknowledge that you've read the example of their contract and you will conform with whatever their terms and conditions are in their contract and the terms and conditions in the specifications, which usually an example of the contract is in the specifications, and that you have to apply your bid specifically on their form. All other forms are not acceptable. And voila. So there's a bid application in there. There's also some other criteria they might be asking for your company's history, portfolio, that type of thing, and your design team, not design team, your management team. Which management team is going to be on this? All sorts of little things that are part of that. Then you have a bid delivery. All right, so they're going to have a deadline at 4:30. They're going to do a bid opening, which means you have to have your bid there before 4:30. Okay, and that includes your bid bond. So your bid application, your proposal, if you don't have a specific application, your bid bond, and delivered, hand delivered, or FedExed, whatever's agreed upon. Sometimes you can take a photo of your bid bond, add that to your electronic submission, and then submit and send your bid bond by FedEx to the address that they have. So there's all sorts of little things that go along with the bid delivery. You have to be savvy on what that is. Sometimes it's a hand delivery and you have to be there for the bid opening because they won't post it. Depends on what municipality it is. they might only have one admin person in some of the smaller townships. So they don't want to be messing around and having that person filling out all sorts of stuff. It's just, hey, you show up, we're going to open the envelopes and we're going to award it. There you go. That's it. Then you have other more sophisticated cities will develop a bid tabulation. So let's say it's a bigger project, you got 5 or 6 competitors. They're going to send out, hey, this is the bid opening resulted with these 5 prices and alternates and all that stuff that goes along with it. And sometimes it'll say qualified, disqualified. So if the bid bond didn't show up with that application, they'll disqualify it, but they'll still post it, but disqualify. If it's disqualified, then we'll talk about that here in the results. So then we go to the results. All right, we have now made it to the bid. We're either going to be the apparent low bidder, second low bidder, third or higher, yet still competitive, or are we going to be third or higher and not competitive? Okay, and so let's go over that. So for the apparent low bidder, that's great news for us, but it also means we got a lot of work to do. All right, so oops, I'm going to do this. All right. Hopefully we can get there. There we go. All right. So you get to ring the bell. That's the big deal, right? That's awesome. Because remember, you only win maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 estimates that you do. And so it's a big deal to ding, ding, ding. Hey, we won one, or at least we're apparent low bidder. Some companies like to wait to ring that bell until it's awarded. I like it if we're the low bidder, apparent low, and it's not super low. If we're very low, that's a problem. If it's apparent low, then and we're within 10% or so from the next one, then we're probably good. But if you're 80% lower than everybody else, that's bad. You missed something, right? Maybe you didn't order the $4 million generator, you didn't estimate it, or it wasn't on your spreadsheets failed and you guys didn't catch it in your overview and your modification process. So that's a big deal. I should have added that to the apparent low bidder, but let's just say that that's not the case, that you're competitive and you're the low bidder. So you get to ring the bell, that makes you feel good. You do a legal review to make sure that all your paperwork is right, all your insurances are there, the whole works. I put it just as legal review, but it actually covers insurance, bonding, the whole works. You were going to have to get your bonds together for your whatever's required on that job. Typically, it is a payment bond and a performance bond. So your payment bonds have all your subcontractors, all your vendors have the right to go after your payment bond if you refuse to pay them. Okay. You have to do that correctly, but they have a right to go after it. And so it protects the owners because there's lien rights in, at least in Washington State, there's lien rights that vendors and contractors have that that they can actually go against the property and make it very difficult for the property to be resold, or there's all sorts of things to worry about. But with that's why they force us to have a payment bond. And then the performance bond means that if we fail to perform or we get fired for cause or whatever the hell it is, that the project is still going to be funded um, to get the scopes that are in the contract completed, whether it's by the general that's at risk, or if they sub it out, or not sub it out, if they farm it out to a new contractor, like you get fired for cause. All right, and then the rapid paperwork. There's a massive amount of paperwork that has to get done in a short period of time. So typically they give you 10 days. So you're the apparent low, that's when you should start doing all your paperwork and stuff. They're still going to go through their process, they being the stakeholders, the primary stakeholders. They're going to go through their process, make sure that you're a real legitimate bidder, the whole works. And that they're confident that you can get the job done. That's the key. Um, and once they do that, then they're going to give you 10 days to get all your paperwork. So they're going to give you an intent to award and then a notice to proceed. Between the intent to award and the notice to proceed, there's going to be a contract generated. The contract needs to be reviewed by the legal team, then your legal team. Then you sign it, do all the work, get everything going, and it should look just like the one that's in the spec. So you get that back to them with all the paperwork, all the bonds, all that nonsense. Within 10 days, you'll get a notice to proceed sometime shortly thereafter. Once they've reviewed it, stamped it, signed it, everybody gets signed, executed contracts. All right, off to the races. That's when you end up going to pre-construction. All right, that's when it begins. Estimator is still involved as a pre-con. Let's go back real quick and talk about second low bidder. There's a possibility that you still win. All right, if the low bidder, if while the stakeholders, primary stakeholders, owners are reviewing the low bid, they're going to determine whether or not they've met the criteria. Let's say it's a woman-owned, veteran-owned, mandatory 10%, but the first parent low bidder did not include that sub information in the bid. So their bid is disqualified. Now you're the low bidder, and everything that the apparent low bidder had to do, you have to get done, and you have to do it quick. So you only have so many days to respond. So you got to make sure you're paying attention to that. You also have the option as the second bidder or even higher to appeal. So you can file a complaint or anyhow, you can appeal to the stakeholders and say that you don't believe that the apparent low bidder is qualified bidder for whatever reason. And then, of course, you can track the award notice. So you have to do that anyhow. So while it's being processed, while they're making their decisions, you want to track passively if you want to find out when it's awarded. Because if it's a public project, it's going to be a notice of intent to award. So there you go. So you have a possibility of winning. And if you lose, well, it's a humble loss. You're pretty damn close. You were competitive. Take it as a humble loss. No big deal. And if you win, ring the bell. If you're the third or higher yet competitive bidder, let's say you're within 10% or so, and it's up to you guys, up to your company to decide what's okay. Is 2% the goal to be that close from the spread between the low bidder and high bidder? And it also depends on how complex the job is. If it's just a simple wooden deck around a house or a wooden deck around a club, everyone should be pretty much within a percent or two of each other. If it's complex, like a $35 million building with furnishings and everything else in there, that can be huge gaps. That could be 12%. I mean, that's a lot. That could be there could be huge gaps in that. And it could also uh, be a problem because maybe they've got guys who uh, trades persons who are very experienced at doing hospital work. This is a hospital job. They've done this type of work 15 times. They've got it down. There's no efficiency loss. They know their pricing. They're confident in their pricing. And us, while we were bidding it, we don't have that same confidence. We added a 12% contingency, and all of a sudden we lost it by 13%. So technically, if we didn't have the contingency in there, we only lost it by 1%. But if we were to do the job, we think it would still take 12% more effort than the guys who do it all the time. They're confident they can do it for their price. So we don't want to lose the job or win the job, but lose the profit. So sometimes it's better to lose the project. So anyway, So as long as you're in there and you want to track your bid tabulations, okay? So you want to put that in your book of knowledge. So BOK is BOK, Book of Knowledge. You want to track all that. It can be a journal type of entry. It could be, I like using a book of knowledge and a spreadsheet because I can always add a tab, add notes to the end of it. And if I want to do searches, spreadsheets are so much easier to do searches on. Some guys do write, actually, some guys actually write journals, just like you would a diary. I don't particularly like that. But whatever you want to do is, or whatever your company tells you to do, that's what you do. All right, if you're third or higher and you're non-competitive, you're outside of your margin. Let's say you're 25% off and you're 25% high. Why the hell am I 25% high? So you got to analyze the bid and constructability, or just find out why you're 25% higher than everybody else. And if it's just two bidders, it might make sense that you're 25 to 30% higher, even 50% higher, because the other bidder might have forgotten something. And so while they're the apparent low, if there's only two bidders, they're the apparent low and they're low by 50%, they're shaking in their boots. And maybe rightly so. Or they hit the target and we're way high. And so you got to decide why. So you analyze that to figure that out. And then, of course, you add it to your book of knowledge. Uh, you revise your strategy if you find out as a result of your analysis. Uh, and then you put it to your book of knowledge. And if, like in the one case where it's two bidders and they were 25, 50% lower, um, then it could be or not quite like that. It could be a joyful loss if the other person was lower and they forgot something, or you were extremely high, but you're absolutely sure you did everything right and you have no idea why the other bidder was low. Sometimes we had an example of this in one of our projects where the apparent low was a self-performing operator. So, or it was an owner operator. So he did all the work, whereas the company that I was estimating with was a union company, and we have to pay operators, they have to have oilers and maintenance people, yada, yada, yada. Whereas this is an owner operator, they don't have to do none of that stuff. They don't even have to meet the criteria that's written in the contract for wage because they're not paying a wage. In some cases, they might have, depending on the structure of their company. But there's a lot of stuff that uh, there's a lot of reasons why you could be way high as compared to someone that's low. And it's not always that they screwed up, it's they have an advantage of some kind. So anyhow, knowing all that. So let's get back to now we're at pre-con. We won the project. Now we're at pre-con. Let's see if I can get this. I'm sorry about giving you nausea. All right, pre-con. Let's look at this. So now the estimator works with the project team to create a budget, a schedule, uh, transfer the winning quotes for both the subs and the vendors, and update the BOK. Make sure that the book of knowledge is up to date and answer all the questions that the project team has. All right. So, this real quick. So the project team includes the superintendent, project manager, or construction manager with their subordinate project engineers. There's a project admin and support, office support, and consulting support. Usually, the estimator doesn't have any influence with those other folks, but they do talk with the superintendent and work with the superintendent and project manager. Typically, the superintendent and project manager are part of the estimating team and will be collaborating throughout the estimating process. Not always, but it does happen. So especially if it's a bigger company, then very often the superintendent is deeply part of it. All right, so the superintendent has assistant superintendents and general foremans, and then of course underneath them there's foremans, and that's about it for this type of thing. Very rarely does the estimator end up talking with the assistant supes or general foremans unless the superintendent has delegated it down. But they do interact. It has happened. So now this goes on into the construction project. It's actually, the estimator does get involved. I'm sorry, this is just getting too, I'm going to do this one more time. Let me do something real quick here. Sorry about the, there we go. Let's do it this way. And this way. And this way. There we go. All right, so now the project started. Now the estimator is interacting with the project. So the estimator will look at the price change. So the estimator is going to help price change orders in some cases. A lot of times it's just going to be assigned to a foreman or whatever, but the foreman is going to call and say, what do you have on the books for this type of work? Do you have any historical data? What vendors do you got? So that's taken care of. Just describe the bid logic. So sometimes um, the superintendent or project manager is going to say, hey, this number you have for this type of scope, it's not realistic. Where did you come up with it? And you're going to say, well, this is what the book of knowledge says, the box says, or um, I expected you guys to use this piece of equipment during this duration and with this many folks, this much debris, all out crane, any support stuff. That's where I came up with that number. Well, that's not realistic. Or, man, that's way high, which is great. If it's way high and you won the project, that's great. And so what'll happen is the project manager will then redelegate that money in the budget. So typically, this may come up during budgeting. Sometimes it just comes up as, overlapping scope. For example, a demolition company might have priced in their scope taking out the electrical demo. The electrical company would price their scope as by line item that says, hey, 35,000 for demo. There's overlap. You didn't catch it pre-bid, but you won the project. Now you've got two scopes that are overlapped. You tell whoever you want to pull it out of their scope and reduce their price, give you a change order, a deductive change order. And in that case, you now have 30,000 left in your budget, 30,000 added to your budget, but you don't pass that, you don't necessarily pass that on to the owner at this point. Maybe at the end of the project, that's something you want to do. That's a business decision. But at this point, you don't. So they're going to describe, work with them on the bid logic, which you came up with, the constructability logic, that's the equipment, tools, whatever. Productability. So at the time of the bid, Jim and 5 carpenters were the ones who you're using for their productability. But it ended up going to Sally and a bunch of other carpenters, 3 carpenters. Okay, so production was slower, not because of Sally, but you're only using 3 carpenters versus 5. It's slower, but it goes across a wider um, span of time. And so there's costs involved with every day of work. And it's not always because, you know, sometimes there's daily costs of doing business on a job site. As long as it's not affecting the total schedule, it's not usually that big of a deal. But if you're on the critical path And because of what you've done, instead of putting 5 carpenters on there, you put 3 on there. It's affecting the schedule, it's affecting productivity because you can't get to the next step until those guys are done. And it's pushing your float time, whatever's left in the schedule, it's pushing it into the liquidated damages zones. So you're trying to figure out why the hell are we why is this happening? And then you go back and you find that the estimator bid it 5 people for 5 days versus 3 people for 8 or 10, right? And so you find that glitch and you annotate that and you write that down. And then you find alternative products. Let's say the owner has decided that they don't want those light fixtures. The design team comes back and says, hey, we want to put in some different kinds of light fixtures, upgrade, downgrade, whatever the hell it is. So you'll find alternative vendors for that. That's the estimator will help with that. Subcontractor quotes and markups. They're just going to verify, like I said, there's overlaps or hey, we marked up 25% on this new subcontractor that we've never worked with because I think we're going to have to hold their hand. And so it turns out that you didn't have to hold their hand. They're awesome. So now you have 25% additional markup that you can move to another portion of the budget. Um, or quite the opposite. It's usually the opposite. Oh, they sucked. We had to pull in another contractor to help them, and we fired them for cause, or which is it happens. All right, so now the project's done. All right, and project's done, and you got to do a post-mortem. So in a post-mortem, you're analyzing everything that happened on the project, check everybody's notes, check all the costs, make sure the production rates are updated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Find out if your logistics plans were right, any challenges, anything that has to be revised for the next bid. You just analyze the hell out of it, talk with all your uh, players, talk with your um, stakeholders. So the stakeholders should be happy, or else you wouldn't have made it to this point. But the estimator is now at this point, so they update the BOC and then they go estimate the next project. So let's take a look at how this is going to be. And the one more click, I think, is going to probably do it for us. Oops. No, that's right. All right. So that's what it looks like. That is the estimator's job in a nutshell. Oops. I forgot to leave these out. There you go. Take a look at that, and that's what life is like as an estimator. I hope that helps. We're going to start the detail work in the next video and with our PowerPoints. All right. Thank you very much for your time. Share and stop the recording.